Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Ajmal Masroor Live. We're talking about the Nationality and Borders Bill. What does that really mean? I've got two lawyers here. They will hopefully explain all that, but I'll introduce them as well in a minute. But, ladies and gentlemen, in a layman's term, I'm afraid my father may have been right when he told me earlier on in my life that, son, do not get rid of the piece of land that I bought for you. Keep it and keep your Bangladeshi nationality, just in case you get thrown out. Just in case you're stripped of your nationality and your citizenship, then you will at least have a place to go. I'm not sure if my father was right at that time when he said it, but now I am sure. And I'm really sorry to give you the bad news. I think he was right. There is a pretty awful development under the good watchful eye of Priti Patel, who is proposing some drastic measures to our law and order, especially the law and order bills that affect you and me, the ethnic minority or minority ethnic or BAME, whatever name you want to call yourself. Anyone who is not white and not native white, doesn't have an English ancestry or European ancestry, may be in trouble. Have I got it completely wrong or have I got it right? Let's find out. We've got two amazing guests. Omar Faruk has got an MBA. I didn't know that. That's a news to me. Well done. And he's a barrister at law. And he works for Shoe Lane Chambers. Assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's wonderful to see you, Ajmal Masroor. First time in this studio and first time to be your guest.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. And Anwar Miah is not a new guest to my program. He has done the circuits and we've had the fights, but he is a wonderful friend as well. He's a barrister at law, legal affairs director, UK Bangladeshi catalyst of commerce and industry. Welcome to our program. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for the invite.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah. How are you?
I hear you both gentlemen were in working very hard. You were at courts today.
I was indeed in court today in good old Maidstone on a road traffic matter, not against Miss Priti Patel, or is it Patel not so pretty?
I don't know. We may get sued for that. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Omar's own twist of words, not mine. And well, you were in court today?
Yes, alhamdulillah. You know, we get to go to court and try and help people wherever we can.
Well, let's see if we can put Priti Patel on the dock, as we say, in the dock, and let's see if we can ask her some of those questions that I'm going to ask you. So tell me a bit more about this bill, Nationality and Borders Bill. What's the problem with that, Anwar?
Well, they're certainly not very good right about it. It's something that sheds light on the suspicions that people have had for a long time about this particular government, that it's not only an inhumane government, but it's a farcical one as well. The kinds of draconian measures that are being proposed in this particular bill, which incidentally at this stage, as I understand it, is approaching its third reading, and then has to go through a particular process, including the House of Lords, before it gets the royal assent. But in any event, the point is that the kinds of provisions and measures that have been proposed within this bill are very worrying indeed. It is the kind of bill that should be worrying not just for people who are seeking to enter the United Kingdom to claim asylum or seek humanitarian protection or whatever other provisions under the various United Nations treaties and conventions that we're signed up to. It is not just about the people who are already in the United Kingdom, who are living here and trying to regularize their stay, but it's also about people who are already in the United Kingdom with settled status, with the perception that they are one of the host community, that they are British, that their rights and their citizenship and nationality cannot be taken away from them. Because as you correctly identify, it is the case that it is being proposed that your citizenship, your nationality can be taken away from you, and here's the alarming bit, without notice. So you can be deprived of your citizenship. You will not even know. There may well be recourse to various challenges and so on and so forth. But the fact that something can be done without notice, the fact that that deprivation can take place from you as a British national, irrespective of whether or not ancestrally you have a connection to a third country, that is at least worrying. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that our respected viewers should be alarmed, because it is very unlikely that there are going to be queues of ships ready to ship out people from the United Kingdom. There's certainly no armada.
You don't have to be worried about the queues of ships, but it does certainly worry people like myself. But I'll come to that worry. Let's understand the bill a bit more. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. Omar, let's come to you. So what does this bill actually entail? Give me in very succinct manner, what is it that we're talking about?
Well, I think that question itself, it's given the field of immigration, which I think my learned friend Anwar is more, he practices and he knows more about, that would be a better question to ask him. But I'll say this in terms of the bill itself. What it proposes is to take somebody's, as my friend Anwar has said, to take somebody's nationality, citizenship away without notice. And I am concerned that people and viewers would be worried about it, and I'm not trying to detract from your question. What it does remind me of, during bar school, I think there was an instance, and when I say bar school, this is about 95, 96, there was an incident whereby Israel had dumped 400 Palestinians on a border and made them stateless. So all of us might remember that. And in a nutshell, what this bill is trying to do, and we'll get to the point whether actually it has any teeth or whether it will be effective in due course, but what it's trying to do is to take somebody's nationality away, take somebody's citizenship away, and make them stateless. And the idea of it, I think, was given birth to. It's not something new. Once upon a time when I was in the civil service, David Blunkett's principal private secretary was my mentor at the time. And David Blunkett was also, being a Labour man, but he was also very ferocious against people who are against national security and so forth. So you might remember...
He was a very right-wing but Labour
Indeed.
Home Secretary, remember.
And you might remember that he came up with an agreement with Jordan to take Mr. Abu Qatada away, that they would not torture him, and there was a memorandum of understanding. I can't remember whether Abu Qatada's citizenship was taken away, and I commented at that time with the ferocity he had in terms of getting rid of people as to whether he was a man of vision. So
it is a serious worry that, so for example, I go to a country, third country outside the UK, and I may have made a comment while I've been abroad or while I was here. And while I'm abroad, without any notice to me, my citizenship gets stripped or taken away by Home Secretary at that time. I try and come back to the UK, I can't. What would I do then, Anwar, if that happens? And it can happen to any one of us. I particularly would probably be one of the easy victims of it, because I do speak, and I do speak my mind quite openly and without really worrying about the implication.
And the fact is that the rest of us who know you, the people whose lives you touch by making those comments, appreciate the fact that you are able to stand up and bear that flag and carry that forward, and people are grateful for that. It's an important voice and it needs to be heard, and you do that. In terms of what happens, well, we see a clear example in the case of, say, Shamima Begum, where she is in effectively no man's land. She's in a jurisdiction which has very little recognition, controlled by Kurdish separatists who have a jurisdiction which may or may not have any sort of international law being imposed, but certainly not one of, say, whether it's Iraqi sovereignty or Syrian sovereignty or not. Either way, it's unclear. But the point is this. Shamima Begum has been deprived of her nationality and citizenship without going into the merits of who's right and who's wrong, whether it is well-reasoned or not. The point is that she has effectively become stateless. It was suggested at one point, if I stand to be corrected, but I think it was suggested that she should look to Bangladesh. Bangladesh, as I understand it, turned around and said, no, not our problem. So effectively you have a statelessness situation which Omar Miah has referred to quite rightly. And that is something that may be a possibility.
But how could Priti Patel get away with it? Is there no, I'll come to you in a minute, is there no legal recourse for a person if it happens to me?
Well, and Shamima Begum is exercising that. Yeah. What she's doing is she's challenging that. She's judicially reviewing it. It's going through the process. The issue is, of course, whether or not she has a right to come to the United Kingdom to be able to have a fair hearing under what we call the Article 6 process, the right to a fair trial, or whether she can do so from being where she is, through perhaps giving evidence by video link or whatever else the case may be. So there are a number of legal points at stake and at issue. But the significance of the wider diaspora here, who are British nationals, people living here, they may not necessarily be from one nationality, may not necessarily be from one ancestry. You have a situation where people are of mixed heritage from different parts of
Well,
the
my
world.
son already asked that question the other day.
Well, that's
He said
right.
it was going to happen to me.
Well, I didn't want to actually point the finger at you, but you're a classic example, mashallah. And then what happens to that person whose ancestry takes precedence? I mean, you've got a number of different cases. But in answer to your earlier question about what the bill actually entails, I mean, the nationality is simply one issue.
Yes.
The vast majority of it relates to the immigration situation in terms of the rights to claim asylum, how one claims asylum, how you enter the United Kingdom, the criminality that is now directed towards various initiatives, including not just mode of entry and how you claim asylum and on what standard of proof your asylum case is assessed, but also a number of other issues, including lawyers giving advice, for example. There's a provision which sanctions lawyers if, for example, a tribunal finds that a process was perhaps improper. There is even a suggestion, and this is the bizarre thing, that an application for an asylum consideration may take place in a jurisdiction far removed from the UK, and the kind of countries that are being proposed are like Albania and parts of Africa. And that is worrying, because the thing is, it raises all sorts of other concerns about our obligations on pursuant to international treaties, including the Geneva Convention of 1951 and its protocol, and how we reconcile those sorts of provisions.
So let's come over to you, Omar. So
Yes.
what should our people be worried about in effect? Go on.
So the question you posed and the hypothetical situation you posed was when you're outside of the country. So let's take it, you're a British citizen, you're outside of the country like Shamima Begum is, and she had gone to do some unsavory stuff and so forth. And they've taken her nationality away, and then what our government, the British government, tried to do was dump her on Bangladesh. Now, my understanding is that the Bangladeshi citizens and their children and so forth, they get Bangladeshi citizenship automatically. If that is the case, then Bangladesh needs to do some thinking in terms of whether it wants to grant automatic nationality for people who originate from Bangladesh, and therefore the British government can't dump people on Bangladesh. In terms of Shamima Begum, I think in the long term what will happen, practically speaking, is the government is making an example of her, taking away her citizenship. But as my learned friend Anwar has just said, this government is a bit schizophrenic, because we have signed up to tons of international treaties. Under international law, we have huge amount of obligations. Now, we might have left the EU, and we can come to that topic a little later on immigration, but we have not, unless we're going to go to the UN and say we want to be out of all our obligations that and treaties that we've signed up to, and we want to be unique, and we're not going to obey international law, then all of this, in a way I say to our viewers, is all of this is hot air. And why do I say it's hot air? Because Priti Patel has gone along and she said, we are going to take away the nationality of dual citizens. I don't know if the viewers and yourselves will know that there are some very unsavory characters in, let's say, in the Midlands, Blackburn, Rochdale and so forth, who have actually abused vulnerable young children. And some of them have been from an ethnic minority background where they have had dual citizenships. So Ms. Patel and the Home Office have done this already, is that they've taken away their British passports. But these monsters who have abused young children, and they have been convicted of a certain ethnic background, until now, hitherto, the government hasn't been able to send them. So why am I sharing this with you? Is because I'm saying to our viewers,
So it's impractical, really.
Impractical, don't be alarmed with this. And yes, there is a big difference between somebody being outside the jurisdiction and the British government or elements of the British government playing games by withdrawing citizenship. It's very, very different when the person is in England, and I've given you some very unsavory characters who've been convicted of sexual assault and rape and so forth, and the government can't get rid of them.
So that's clear.
Yeah.
But let's unpack the bill a bit. So there is a claim that this bill will break the people smugglers' business model.
It'll do the reverse.
But that's what the claim is. Why do you think we'll do the reverse?
It'll do the reverse. And in fact, it will have far-reaching consequences as well. First of all, it criminalizes people who wish to seek asylum by the kind of means that exist at the moment. The problem is that there is no lawful way to claim asylum. You can't make an application in your country of origin for asylum to come to the United Kingdom. You just can't do that. The only way you claim asylum is at port. And at port means either at Heathrow Airport or wherever, whichever airport I just named. But when you reach a port and say, I want to claim asylum because I fear persecution upon return to whichever country I come from. And then that brings with it a whole host of other sorts of consequences, because you can't enter the UK there's no such thing as a refugee visa. You just don't do it. It doesn't happen. And
so literally you can't come to the UK border and claim asylum. That's shut because our airports are inside the UK. So either you come to another country and say, I want to go to the UK and seek asylum, and before you can even board the plane, you're refused. You can't take a ship, you can't take the train, because all of that is shut.
Well, that's right. I mean, the bizarre situation is that at the moment what people do is that if they come on, say, a particular visa, like a visit visa or whatever, and either upon entry with that visa, they go to the desk and say, well, actually, look, I've got a visit visa, but the reality is if I go back to my country, they're going to kill me. Here's my profile. And then that triggers a process such as interviews and decisions, and then if the decision is adverse, a right to have that considered by an independent arbiter such as a tribunal. The problem you have is that the very people that this bill is purporting to protect are actually going to be more exploited by these smugglers because they will be even more vulnerable. And more vulnerable not only in taking that particular journey and going through a process, but even fearing making the application for asylum in the first place. Because if they fear that by making an application for asylum, they will reveal their mode of entry and how they got in, what they did to enter, and so on and so forth, which may attract a criminal sanction or some sort of criminal
Well, it is
inquiry.
a criminal offence to take any of those perilous journeys people are making.
Well, it'll not only be a criminal sanction to actually make the journey, but if somebody assists you,
They'll also be.
They'll also be criminalized. So basically, there are a number of other kinds of international obligations, such as Omar Miah was talking about, which we're signed up to, such as assisting persons who are in distress on the waters.
But do you know that British government...
And that becomes a criminal offence.
Do you know British government is actually saying, thank you for that, is saying actually will save lives?
It may save this, but let me share with you exactly on this point what the British government wanted to do in contravention of our international obligations. And I think my learned friend and brother Anwar will know this. The boats that are coming in from France. So what our government, in its enlightened thinking, thought we would do is tell the border force to return those boats back to France. Now imagine our border forces returning a boat full of refugees in these very, very unstable, unsafe boats, and these refugees are directed to go back to France and they die along the way. What is going to be the responsibility? So our government's policy, yes, like the Poles are supposed to be doing to the people on the Belarus border, was, yes, we'll do this. Do you know what happened? Then they went and thought about it. Under international law, if these refugees died, yes, the UK may not prosecute our border guards if they were to implement this policy. However, other countries which have legislation to be able to prosecute our border guards, and Interpol would go after them. So long and behold, right thinking got in the way and they ditched this policy. So the issue, I think, sometimes with some of the ministers, Anne Whitcomb said about Michael Howard, who was a Home Secretary, that he has something of the night about him. Unfortunately, Priti Patel, it seems to me, has something more than the night about her. And she...
It's a good thing you're not a member of the Conservative Party anymore.
Yes, of course, it's a very, very good thing. And I'm delighted I am not. And so forth. So having said that, there is something about the night about her. And I think there's something about the night of about our Prime Minister, and it seems
leaving aside the personalities behind these unsavory policies, the impact of it is what you're saying is not going to save lives. It's actually going to put more lives at risk. That's what you're saying.
Indeed. And another point I want to make, not to
minute before we go to break.
Not to diverge from this, is that Britain felt that once we left the EU, we would have more control over the borders and so forth. But actually, France, when the asylum seekers come to France and say to France, well, we want to go to Britain and we see you as a transit territory. In fact, we are going to receive more and more immigrants in the UK than we have done in the past. And that's what the statistics show.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's come to a time for us to take a break. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue this bill, try and analyze it and see its impact on your lives, the lives of our community. And perhaps if you haven't done it, maybe it's time to buy a piece of land in Bangladesh. Don't go too far away. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our program, Nationality and Borders Bill. Are you worried about your own nationality? Are you worried about you getting stuck in Bangladesh? Go to Bangladesh for a holiday and then you're told you can't come back because your citizenship has been stripped. You've been revoked by Priti Patel. Not a very pretty thing to do, I know. But it's a name that she'll have to live with, nevertheless. But ladies and gentlemen, there is a claim by our government that this is a good bill. It will end the smuggling that's going on. It will end the death that we've witnessed, including the 27 who died recently. And you know what? It will apparently make things better. Is this true? I want to ask this question to you, and if you've got a question or a point of view that you want to share, your story, somebody that you know has come through hell and all the awful palaver that they had to go through to come to this country, give us a call. Love to speak to people who have made it. I was listening to a radio show the other day. A gentleman who came to this country 12 years ago at the back of a lorry, almost died while he was coming, came here, established himself, spoke brilliant English, and he's now working for the refugees. And I was so impressed by what he had to say. What he had to say was, even then, Britain was impossible to get to. How are we supposed to come to your country? If all the legal routes are closed, we have to take the irregular routes to get in. And that's a very powerful thing to say. If all the legal means or regular means are shut, what are they supposed to do? Well, don't come to Britain. Well, that's not a good thing. Britain has got obligations. Obligations on people who seek asylum. May come a time when Britain will need to seek asylum. Or are we so invincible that we'll never need to seek asylum? Let's ask that question to both of my guests. But if you've got a question, please call us right now. Our number is on the screen. You can ask any question you like. Anwar, I know this is going to save lives, but that's not going to end the awful plight of the refugees, this bill. This is going to make it worse. You said earlier on the smuggling is going to continue. People are going to be criminalized, not the smugglers, but individuals. How do we change this? What do we do?
Well, before you get to that, it's not just stopping there, you see, because once they have reached the port of entry, the criminality continues and the vulnerability continues, because the very people who have arrived, the very people whom the bill is seeking to allegedly, purportedly seek to protect, those people are going to be vulnerable and even more vulnerable because they will be exploited by other persons, if not the smugglers, but whoever they go to, because by them then reaching out to claim asylum or exposing how they got into the United Kingdom and so on and so forth, by incriminating themselves, they're going to make it worse for them. So they would end up being exploited, working in conditions and for people who will not be complying with the legislative framework of employment and labour laws and so on and so forth. And that's going to make things snowball in terms of the kind of difficulties. But in terms of what we can do about it, well, the bill hasn't passed yet. The difficulties is that the government which is sponsoring this bill and bringing this bill forward, and the Home Secretary in particular, they have a significant majority in the House of Commons. They will put in a 3-line whip and they'll make sure that it passes. There may well be rebels within the government. We hope that it's sufficient to tip the balance. It may or may not be. The fact is that we and the people hopefully will lobby the members of parliament in order to make sure that they vote against them. I won't necessarily hold my breath, but at least this is a little bit that they can do. So, for example, if they write letters and lobby their MP, that's a little bit of pressure. But also there are a number of different non-governmental organisations who are putting pressure on. The usual household names, for example, like Amnesty and so on and so forth. Everybody's bringing forward their own campaign in order to be able to flag up the kind of inhumanity that this bill seeks to represent. And I'm not sure whether or not that's going to be sufficient to actually tip the balance.
Well, you probably won't be able to alter the Tory majority and the bullish behaviour.
But there may be possibilities of seeking amendments to the bill, because when it goes to various readings, amendments come in. The House of Lords will look at any amendments that are proposed and whatever else is being suggested as being incompatible with our obligations.
One of the recent House of Lords speeches that I was listening to, one of the Lord members, who I can't remember the name, who actually said in his conclusion that we, Britain, have become accomplice to the murder of the 27 who perished in sea because of the perilous journey that they took, with the with the smugglers. There is a claim that it will increase protection of the refugees and survivors of modern slavery, Omar. But funny thing is, it also proposes to create provisions of offshore asylum procedure, thus putting the asylum seekers further at risk if, for example, they open up a asylum processing center in
Timbuktu,
for example.
Well, I think the Australians have tried this policy and procedure and so forth.
And they failed.
And what is fascinating is actually Australia, if you look at the
Out
history
of all countries.
Well, the fascinating thing is Australia was a sort of our colony for getting rid of
dumping ground
criminals and
unsavory
elements.
Yeah.
So
are you saying Australian ancestors, current Australian citizens' ancestors, would be criminals and unsavory rejects of Britain?
I don't know, I'm not saying that, but the British history will show the type of people that Britain dumped in Australia and what Australia has become, and Australia is a very successful and well-developed country. The issue is outsourcing your headache and putting that headache, as it were, on somebody else's land really will not solve anything.
Isn't that very normal for the Western world? America created Guantanamo Bay.
Indeed.
The entire Western world gave torture chambers to Morocco and other countries to do their torturing of so-called extremists.
Well, you see, creation of these offshore unsavory centers is done. Do you know why? Because if these centers were based within America, then America wouldn't have got away with what it got away doing when it was based outside. So the reason why even I think our Home Secretary has proposed having, I think, boats, isn't it, in the middle of the sea?
Isn't it because she has a good motive, though? She wants to increase and make the process quicker and clear the backlog as quickly as possible. So send them to a third country. All of these backlog could be done in no time.
Well, I don't understand the thinking behind it and the logic behind it, i.e. if you set up a processing center, let's say, in the middle of the sea on a big ship, or if you set up a processing center, let's say, in Albania, or maybe in Bangladesh if you want, if you feel...
That'll be easy, all the Afghans will come to Bangladesh.
Yeah. So if you set up that sort of processing center in those places, how it helps the situation, only God knows, because I don't know what...
So if somebody is successful, Anwar, in a third country processing center, then they would have to be brought to England. But it sounds like it's a quick way of saying no to everybody who's making an application in a third-party country.
I don't think it's going to expedite anything, but the first point is that before you get to the expedition, what you need to understand is that there is a cost consequence of that. The current estimate is that it's going to cost £100,000 sterling for each person to process them. So first of all, you're going to have to send them there in the first place, house them, feed them, engage in the particular process with any kind of rights of review, and then consider them. And when that's done, the total bill, if it's going to be 100,000, you can calculate the kind of numbers we're talking about. And guess who's going to foot the bill? You and I, the taxpayers in the United Kingdom. The belts of the taxpayers are already quite tightened because of the fact that they've just come through a pandemic. There's a huge amount of debt that needs to be repaid. The likelihood is that our taxes are going to rise, and our service is going to be reduced. So on the back of that, we're still going to have to find many billions in order to be able to engage in this particular process. And the suggestion that it's going to somehow demotivate people to come in the first place, well, I don't see that, because what will happen is that people who come, they won't bring themselves forward and make the asylum claim. Okay. What they will do is that they will just disappear into the black market or the population. They will work in conditions and be exploited and become vulnerable. Nobody's going to make those asylum claims because of fear that they're going to be transported elsewhere. You'll have this huge...
But wouldn't that really solve the problem?
Well,
that is to deter people entering the UK. That's the aim.
But it is not deterring them. People are going to come. They won't make the asylum claim. They'll just go underground. They'll create these kinds of mini communities, communities where they are going to be exploited in unimaginable ways, and that's going to be disastrous not just for them. It's going to be disastrous for we as a country, because we will no longer be great.
Well, what do you think, ladies and gentlemen? What do you think of this whole nationality and borders bill? I know you guys are thinking is a bit too much for me. We can't really understand most of what these lawyers are talking about. Well, if I can understand, I'm sure you can understand. The risk is huge. Our rights as citizens, slowly but surely, is being eroded away by this government. The idea or the pretext for erosion of our rights, our civil liberties, our citizenship right is simple. It is to deter refugees and asylum seekers from coming to our country. Is it any different to throwing your baby with the bathwater?
I don't know if I don't know if it's just to deter refugees and asylum seekers. In fact, if one remembers David Cameron when he was the Prime Minister and he came across, and this is a serious challenge. We were, rather than exporting tourism to Syria, we were exporting terrorists to Syria. And he came across the problem because there are some diehard people who have convictions that will not be shaken, which are extremist to the core, and what to do with these people that want to go and kill other people. So one of the thought processes that was going through is if you take away the citizenship of somebody and they're not a British citizen and you drone them, which was happening under Cameron's watch, you drone them, and these guys, got names like Beatles and so forth. Why they didn't get names like Hamsi Hammer or whatever it is, I don't know.
Just stay with that thought. I've got a caller who is desperately wanting to talk to us. Hello, assalamu alaikum, caller.
Walaikum salam.
Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, rahmatullah, barakatuh, Ajmal, and to your respective guests in the studio.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm fine, thank you.
Very
You
good.
invited us to give our share our
Please
thoughts
do.
on
I'd love to hear from
your
our
program.
viewers.
A lot of brothers and sisters that I've been discussing this issue about immigration over the years, there's something we don't understand, and okay, I get the government are trying to control the number of immigrants coming to the country, but is it not a shame? We also need to reflect on the Muslim countries, why most of these immigrants that are coming from Muslim countries are not seeking refuge in Muslim countries. They're actually escaping from Muslim countries.
But there is very little we can do about those Muslim countries. We don't live there.
Brother, we can't say
And
that.
my program isn't broadcast there
We
either.
have plenty of Muslim brothers and sisters around the world
want to say
that
something.
hold positions of responsibility, are Islamic personalities, have organizations. We have Islamic states more than we've ever had. Our population, Muslim population around the world, is tremendous. This is something that it is a shame that Muslims are not seeking refuge
that's wrong.
in Islamic
Can I-
countries.
Well, let's what you said is interesting, but Anwar and Omar both have a view. Just stay there, don't go anywhere. Anwar, stop.
Well, with respect, the brother is completely wrong. Do you know that the number of refugees taken by the United Kingdom is minuscule compared to the number of refugees taken by Muslim countries? Do you know that Turkey is one of the greatest populations of refugees that they are feeding, accommodating, medicating, educating? Do you know that even Bangladesh is containing 1 million Muslims? Bangladesh, a country which is regarded as one of the most poorest countries in the world. 1 million Muslims are being fed and watered and housed and accommodated in Bangladesh. Do you know that even Saudi Arabia, please let me finish, even Saudi Arabia, a lot of people say bad things about Saudi Arabia, they provide a kind of standard of dignity to the refugees who have come to Saudi Arabia that even Western countries would be ashamed of. And that is why we would say that we should never point the finger at our Muslim countries, because countries with Muslim populations, because they are doing greater than they can actually do, whereas these countries, which the European countries who say that they are the greatest and the most democratic and the most accommodating, are the ones who are providing the least hospitality.
Can before you come in, Omar, just to, I hear your sentiment, but I also feel that you should not get away with it without being challenged.
Tell
The quantity of number of people housed in Bangladesh, in Turkey, in the Middle
Saudi
East,
Arabia,
in the Middle East,
Jordan.
You're correct. The number is very, very high, and probably 20, 30 times anything the entire Europe put together would be. That's true.
Yeah.
But the quality that you've described actually is a bit too far-fetched.
No, it's not. And I'll justify.
Hold on, I haven't finished.
Okay, go on.
Saudi Arabia doesn't even provide quality of living for its legal citizens, forget about asylum seekers. I've been to Bangladesh and I've seen refugee camp in Rohingya. I've been to the Rohingya camps right inside. I've seen with my own eyes people rising from holes on the earth because Bangladeshi government is refusing any shelter for them. Charity organizations, individual Muslims like you and me, we donate millions of pounds from our hard-earned cash to be able to, and Bangladeshi people, I know Bangladeshis from northern parts of Bangladesh, on the back of a pulley, have taken food and refuge.
Do you know?
Hold on,
Yeah.
to the Rohingya.
Yeah.
So the government, Bangladesh government or Muslim government, are actually not providing quality. They're just being an open space. Saying, come in.
No, absolutely not. Do you know, for example, that where you have in the United Kingdom and in France, where people are living in tents, where the sanitation is worse than some third world countries, and on par with some of the banana republics, do you know that if you look at the Saudi Arabian accommodation that's being provided, not tents, proper houses.
I've been there.
Well, you may be there.
I've been there.
In which
human beings are not treated like humans. They're treated worse than
hang on a
animals.
second. No. I think what you said was that those who are partaking in labour in the Middle East, such as
I'm talking about quality.
Now, hang on a second. The people who are working in certain Middle Eastern countries are being paid and treated in a particular way. We're talking about refugees.
I'm talking about refugees too.
No, hang on. In terms of refugees, if you look at the way that the Saudis and I'm no fan of any particular regime,
but if you look at
no, hang on a second. It's got to be fair and balanced. In terms of the way that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is treating refugees, in the way that the Turkish government is treating refugees is actually a great deal better than those tents and squalor. And do you know, even in the United Kingdom, you don't need to walk very far. You can go to certain quarters of Great Britain where I can point the finger to, and you will see the kind of squalor.
You want to speak? Go ahead.
I wanted to say, even, and I wholeheartedly agree with what Anwar has just said, even we forget that Iran, for example, is hosting millions of refugees. Pakistan is hosting millions of refugees. Afghanis, Turkey, the greatest number. Now, in terms of Europe, we've got different reactions from different European countries. Actually, and Merkel, what she did during in allowing refugees to come, and the German government has done, I thought was very enlightening. And that's the sort of approach our government, the French government, and everybody else needs to take. And I think it is unfair to look at developing countries and countries that are economically poorer than ourselves, like Bangladesh, Pakistan, Iran and others, and say we expect the same level of care, attention, security, safety from Bangladesh. And I think that is very, very unfair. And I also think it's extremely unfair that we as England, if we look at Shamima Begum, born and brought up in England, who went the way she went, goes to Syria, and because she's turned and she's done the things she has done, suddenly we remember, oh, her grandfather and mother and father come from Bangladesh. Let's dump her on Bangladesh. I think it's absolutely outrageous.
I want to ask our viewers, if you've got any further views, please do give us a call. It is important to unpack this conversation. Is this nationality and border bill a good news for you? And how is that going to change? How is that going to impact you and your lives? And our caller who did say that the Muslim communities or Muslim countries have some obligation. I understand where you're coming from, but Anwar has made it very clear. The number of refugees in Muslim countries are far higher in numbers. But I agree with you that the quality of what they're being offered is nothing to be desired by, as far as I'm concerned. But if you've got a view, give us a call. You can challenge all of us. I'm open to that. And final question I have to my guests. It's according to Amnesty International, who have done a thorough analysis of this particular bill, it's written in its analysis that it will apparently, the bill is claiming to be fulfilling the international obligations that Britain has. In fact, it does the opposite, including by measures to introduce a unilateral interpretation of an internationally agreed legal commitment on protecting refugees. How do we, as British citizens, stand proud in such a time where our government is being more draconian than some of the banana republics, as you said.
Well, we shouldn't be proud. In fact, we should be hanging our heads in shame. But let me just very briefly finish off the other question, because it is an important point. The
He's not going to finish.
No,
That's the
no,
problem.
no. But I at least need to touch on it, because you have underscored and reiterated the myth that the people are being treated in a bad way in comparison. But the thing is, you can't do that, because it's not like for like. You've got to consider the per capita situation. You've got to consider the GDP of those countries and the kind of affordability, and you've got to compare it from the nation and the kind of economy that they're coming from. Otherwise, you simply can't do it. And therefore, the disparity between, say, France and the country and the economy there, with the way that the refugees are being treated there, that's the kind of comparison you take, not necessarily comparing France with Bangladesh. It's wholly inappropriate. And in terms of just one final point before I move on to answer your specific question, in terms of what we ourselves do about our ancestry and where we go back and so on and so forth, our viewers who perhaps are possibly of majority Bangladeshi, I believe, ancestry, what they need to do is this. You suggested that there should be a dual nationality. They don't need to have a dual nationality. What will happen is that if they have in their passport a no visa required endorsement or a seal, that will prejudice them, because the thing is, just like if a British national is in Bangladesh and he finds himself in trouble, if they have a no visa required endorsement, then the consular services are different to the kind of services that they would be provided if they did not have that particular seal. So instead of having a Bangladeshi dual nationality, you don't particularly need it. Bangladesh is lovely, by the way, please don't get me wrong, but there's no reason why it is that if somebody wants to protect themselves by way of some sort of insurance policy, they could have a dual nationality of, say, an Irish citizenship. So if, for example, you've got a British nationality, if you want to take dual nationality, take it with an Irish nationality. If you do, in the highly unlikely event, find yourself in a situation where your nationality is being deprived, you could, for example, resort to your other nationality. So it's not the case that you must.
I think I've made up my mind. If my citizenship is revoked, I'm going to get you to fight for me.
Well, just before I finish off, please forgive me. Just before I finish off, the point also is this: in terms of the actual. The actual claim itself of how you come to claim asylum and so on and so forth, and why you come to the United Kingdom. Please don't think that all these asylum seekers, people fleeing persecution, not migrants, people fleeing persecution, they're not coming here because of the £37 a week that is being offered by the United Kingdom. That's not why they're coming. Those people are going to countries where they have some sort of affiliation, whether it's by family affiliation, or whether it's a colonial historical narrative where they speak the language of those countries. So if you're from the Asian subcontinent, you may be more attracted to the United Kingdom, whereas if you're from North Africa, you may be more attracted to Italy.
We're running out of time, that's the
and so on
only
and so forth.
problem.
Yeah. So it's not that the UK is paved with gold, it is because of the... Yeah, absolutely.
Both of us barristers were on live television, and I don't think we are insured to give legal advice to a mass audience. But I will make some suggestions, and I can make suggestions which are personalized. I myself, I only have one nationality, which is the British nationality. I was born and brought up here. I don't have a second nationality, dual nationality. And I can only suggest to family and friends, and I'm not giving advice, that if it is not necessary, then only have the British nationality. And the other thing that we need to understand, our concept of law is based on persona. And in a way, the national of a country is like the property of that country. And no matter how good or bad or whatever we say about this particular government, actually having a British passport or an American or a passport of a powerful country means you have protection. So that is what I would say. I wouldn't go beyond that and advise our viewers, some of them who may have dual nationalities, I would say that to them, that if you want to find out more, then please contact either Anwar or myself, and then we can go into details on a personal level.
I like the invitation for business. We will, of course, charge you for advertising. Ladies and gentlemen, I've run out of time, but it is very disturbing to see a government, elected government, with such a majority in the parliament, actually not only enact draconian laws, but it's getting away with it. It's because you and I are silent. So do check it out. Do write to your MP or MPs in your locality. Make an appointment. Write to the Parliament, to the Prime Minister, write to the Home Secretary. cause a storm in the social media world and make sure people know the impact of this law or this proposed law. We're all citizens equal in this country. One should not be treated differently because of the color or background or ethnicity of their ancestors. We are all equal. That's the bottom line. Anyway, today's discussion is inconclusive in the sense that nationality and border bill, how will that affect you? We'll have to just see. But don't sit on your comfortable seats and sofas thinking it will be all okay. My deep thanks to my two wonderful guests and to yourselves.
Pleasure.
Until inshallah next time, from myself and my team, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam.